This is Democracy Watch. I'm joined by my co-host, voting rights attorney, and the founder of Democracy Docket, Marc Elias. Marc, we have a pretty stunning move from disgraced Trump attorney John Eastman in between his own disbarment proceedings and likely being one of the unnamed co-conspirators in the new Trump indictment. Can you speak on what he did in Colorado?
I mean, this is unbelievable. I mean, like, there's a lot of unbelievable things that Republicans do, but this one's really unbelievable. The Colorado Republican Party decided to challenge an election law, and who'd they hire? John Eastman. John Eastman's in court in Colorado as a lawyer.
Now, I guess, can you explain what the lawsuit that he's signed on to actually is and what it's seeking to do?
Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of the crazy of the crazy, right? Like, the Colorado Republican Party's lawsuit is not like fanciful. It's wrong. It'll lose, but it's not like crazy. Basically, Colorado had a ballot initiative that allows unaffiliated voters to vote in partisan primaries, and the Colorado Republican Party doesn't like that. I understand that, but that's, the law in Colorado, and so they're challenging that. Fair enough. They're going to challenge it. They're going to lose, but to go out and hire John Eastman as your lawyer, I mean, literally, there are thousands and thousands of Republican lawyers. This is the guy you hire?
Yeah, is there any strategy other than just abject lunacy? Is there any strategy that they might be trying to take by virtue of hiring someone who has so much toxic baggage that it's almost impossible not to recognize this?
So I just wonder if it's like a fundraising ploy, right?
Right.
Because they're not going to win the case. So I doubt they're doing this because they're trying to win, but they may be doing it because they figure, like, to you and me, Brian, John Eastman is like a disgraced whatever, but like to them, he's like a rock star. Maybe
He's
this is a big get,
right.
if you're the Republican Party of Colorado.
Yeah. I guess if whoever's listed on a recent indictment is like a big name in the Republican Party these days. Can you speak on the audacity of this guy who I mentioned at the top is likely named in the Trump indictment, still going out there to undermine the democratic process to this very day?
Yeah, so we talked about how crazy this is for the Republican Party of Colorado. Now let's talk about it from the standpoint of John Eastman.
Yeah.
I mean, John Eastman is an unindicted co-conspirator of Donald Trump's. I mean, you keep saying apparent or whatever, but like, he's basically come out and said that he is in the Trump indictment as part of a criminal conspiracy, an alleged criminal conspiracy that he engaged in with Donald Trump and others. And so, like, you'd think you just are like fighting bar charges in California. Like, Jack Smith is like indicting Donald Trump and describing your conduct in great detail. Now may not be the time to bring an anti-democracy lawsuit. Like, now's the time. Maybe you lay low, you write a book, you tweet. He's big on Twitter, maybe, but like, you don't really bring another anti-democracy lawsuit.
Can you clarify what legal exposure John Eastman has in the Jack Smith indictment? Because we don't know that he's been indicted. We simply know that he's, again, listed as an unnamed co-conspirator. So what legal exposure does he have? Because he seems to be in a different category from Donald Trump, who we know has been indicted in this lawsuit.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We ought to be clear. As far as we know, he has not been indicted. There is no indication that he's been indicted. The former president, Donald Trump, has been indicted by a grand jury in Washington, D.C. That indictment was returned, and that is the facts. There are 6 individuals who are listed as co-conspirators. In order to violate the law against conspiracy, which Donald Trump is alleged to have done, you need to have an agreement with one or more other people to break the law. And Eastman and 5 others are those people who allegedly were part of this conspiracy to break the law. Now, the government may never charge those other 6 people. Sometimes they figure, you know what, they're small fish, they're not worth our time, we just want to go after the big guy. They may charge them later. We saw a superseding indictment in Florida where they added additional defendants. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but that's possible. One or more of those people may be cooperating with the grand jury, maybe cooperating with Smith. I doubt that's the case with Eastman, based on his persona. But it's very there. You can't read too much into the fact that they are unindicted co-conspirators. That is their status today. But as we've seen in other cases, that can change over time.
So basically, these people are there in service of the conspiracy charges against Trump because there needs to be other people to have a conspiracy charge. I guess in your best guess, do you anticipate that we will see for those of these unnamed co-conspirators who aren't cooperating with the DOJ? Do you anticipate that we will see some type of charge brought forward, maybe in a superseding indictment?
So I think it's really hard to say. Jack Smith's got to make a fundamental decision about whether or not he wants speed in a case against Donald Trump, or he wants completeness in a case against the conspiracy as a whole, right? If he wants speed in a case against Donald Trump, then he is, he's brought his case, he's brought it against the one person who he's interested in. And when you add co-defendants or other people, it just creates more complexity. It doesn't mean the case is harder. Sometimes the case is actually easier when you charge them, sometimes harder, but it means that there are more lawyers at the table. There are more schedules to coordinate with, and we've seen a little bit of that in Florida where the additional defendants got additional time and it may delay things. So I don't know which way Jack Smith will go. I have no idea. I don't know whether he thinks he can prove beyond a reasonable doubt, each of those 6 people either. He may just have enough to name them as co-conspirators, but have beyond a reasonable doubt for Donald Trump. So we're going to all have to wait and see.
I know this is probably not a fair question, but if you had to prosecute this case and you were reconciling these two conflicting issues of, Donald Trump is a clear and present danger to the United States, and we've got an election coming up, and, obviously with everything that happened in terms of him trying to overturn the election, speed is an important elements of all of this, but at the same time, you got someone like John Eastman, who is very clearly a criminal, and without whom Donald Trump likely wouldn't have been able to move forward with all of his efforts to try to overturn the election. So how do you reconcile those two? What would you do if you were prosecuting this case in terms of choosing between speed and completeness?
Look, obviously, the good news is I don't have to prosecute this case, so
Yeah.
I don't have to make that decision. I will say this, though. I think that we make a mistake when we live too much in the immediate present. One of the mistakes of the Civil War was that we allowed the defeated South to create martyrs and heroes. And we are still living with that legacy today. We are still living with a legacy of what happened after the Reconstruction period ended, the reemergence of Jim Crow. We hoped after January 6th that there would be that the country would be united against what had happened. But we already see some of the perpetrators of those crimes being held up as heroes. They're being celebrated. Donald Trump's got, I think, a choir of people who travel around with him in his rallies, who were who were involved in January 6th. And so I worry that if the Department of Justice, whether it's Merrick Garland's Department of Justice or it's Jack Smith, does not bring the maximum number of cases with the maximum charges, we are going to repeat this history where you're going to have these folks become folk heroes, become icons. There's just a story in the Washington Post about another one of the co-conspirators in the indictment, Jeffrey Clark, now being a sought-after speaker. He was in the Department of Justice and was talking about the Insurrection Act.
Yeah.
So I worry about that. So I think if you forced me into it, I would say it is important that those who were responsible for the insurrection and the effort to overturn free and fair elections are brought to justice, and that is the most important thing.
Okay. If John Eastman, because we're speaking about him here, if he is ultimately charged by Jack Smith in some type of, if an indictment is unsealed against him, or if we do see a superseding indictment, what charges would you anticipate seeing given his role in Trump's attempts to overturn the election?
Oh, I think the charges are the charges. I think that, in Florida, in the Florida case, we saw additional defendants. We also saw additional charges. I don't think we're going to see additional charges. I think the 4 conspiracy charges that you saw would be the 4 charges that anyone who got added would be added to. They'd be added to all 4 of them, or 2 or 3 of the 4, depending on how Smith decided to charge it. But I don't think we would see additional charges. That I guess would surprise me.
Okay. And just in this case more broadly, do you anticipate that we'll see this go to trial before the election?
I do. I do. You know, I practice in Washington, D.C. I have a fair amount of experience with the D.C. courts. This is a no-nonsense judge. She was appointed by President Obama, but she's a pretty law and order, pro-prosecution judge. Sometimes I'm happy with that. Sometimes I'm less happy with that. And she runs a very sort of tight ship. There's nothing about this case that would take over a year to bring to trial.
Okay.
It doesn't involve classified documents. It doesn't involve multiple defendants. Again, that's one of the downsides of adding a lot of defendants. And it doesn't actually involve much complexity. You know, the case is pretty straightforward. When you hear Republican lawyers or you hear Donald Trump's lawyers say what their defenses are, they are nonsensical and frivolous so far, what I've heard. But they're not fact intensive. Like there's not a lot that they have to put forward that is going to mean this trial needs to be delayed. I expect this case will be heard before the election.
And to that point, I think the talking point they're sticking right now is that this is an attack on Donald Trump's First Amendment rights. On page 2 of the indictment, page 2 of a 45-page indictment, Jack Smith expressly wrote that Donald Trump had the right to say whatever he wanted about this election and to even lie about this election. So he preemptively kind of swatted down their entire defense, and yet that's still not stopping them from debuting this defense anyway, because, again, it's not really about the facts here. It's just about perpetuating a narrative.
Right. But this is the thing. Perpetuating a narrative is fine in the political arena. It has some unfortunate place. It had some unfortunate place in the aftermath of 2020 in the civil arena. Like you remember Rudy Giuliani holding press conferences in parking lots. That's not going to get him any place in a criminal case. Like they can go on CNN or on MSNBC or Fox News and say whatever they want. That's not going to impact what's going to get admitted into evidence in a criminal case in the District of Columbia. So in some sense, I don't know who they're appealing to.
Yeah.
They may be appealing to their political base, but right now Donald Trump's got a bigger problem, which is he is facing several indictments that if he's convicted, he could go to prison over. So if I were him, I'd spend a lot more time figuring out good legal defenses to these criminal cases rather than figuring out what's going to work on Fox News.
Yeah. Let's finish off with this. Where do we stand on disbarment for John Eastman, considering he is a party to this Colorado lawsuit?
I mean, as I said, I find it remarkable that he's lawyers here. So he's in the middle of a disbarment proceeding in California that's been going on for some time. The news reports out of it doesn't sound like it's going very well for him. Certainly, being an unindicted co-conspirator is not going to aid the effort to keep his bar license. I think in the end, it is very likely that the bars, plural, across the country, which frankly have some need for accountability. I mean, how they allowed this conduct to go on and not act sooner is a separate question. But I think the bars now are under pressure to do the right thing and clean up the house. So I would not bet, if I were a betting man, I'd not be betting on John Eastman completing this Colorado case as a licensed lawyer unless the case gets dismissed quickly.
All right, well, from your lips to God's ears. Marc, thank you for the work that you and your team are doing to protect voting rights across the country. For anybody watching, if you want to help Marc, then please sign up for Democracy Docket. It's a free news outlet focused on voting and elections. The link is right here on the screen. It's also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Marc Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.